My brother got the keys in front of everyone. My father held them up at Sunday lunch like they were a crown, then dropped them into Michael's hand while my mother cried and called it the beginning of the next chapter. The restaurant staff clapped because my aunt had told them to. I smiled because that was what I'd been doing for years. The building those keys opened was the family's catering warehouse, office and storefront. On paper, Michael was now operations director. In practice, he still didn't know supplier codes, payroll schedules, or which freezer door jammed if you pulled it too hard. I knew all of it. I'd known it since I was 23. Then my father turned to me and said, lightly, "You'll help him settle in. You're good at details." I nodded. I didn't say that the details were the business. And then Michael leaned over and asked me something that changed everything. "You still have all the passwords, right?" He asked the question with a grin, like I should be flattered. Around us, glasses were still raised, napkins still folded on expensive plates, the whole family admiring the son who had finally stepped up. Michael had spent the last 4 years stepping out, of deadlines, meetings, and consequences. But he had charm, broad shoulders, and the kind of confidence people confuse with competence. I told him yes, I had the passwords. Then I asked which ones. He laughed. All of them. That answer told me more than any speech my father had made. Michael didn't want to learn the system. He wanted access to it. Fast, clean, effortless. Later that night, my mother sent me 3 messages in a row. "Be patient with him. Your father is proud. Don't make this difficult." Difficult. That word again. As if keeping the company alive during 3 late invoices, 2 failed audits, and 1 van fire had been easy. I stared at the screen, then opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside it was every task my brother had never done. The folder was boring on purpose. No dramatic label, just handover notes. Inside were dated checklists, voice notes, supplier disputes, corrected tax filings, screenshots of unpaid bills, and 1 spreadsheet I updated every time Michael forgot something and I quietly fixed it. It stretched back 3 years. I hadn't created it as a weapon. I created it because chaos multiplies when nobody admits where it started. The next morning, Michael breezed into the office wearing a new watch and called a leadership meeting. By leadership, he meant me, our chef Luis, our dispatcher Marisol, and the accountant. He stood at the head of the table and announced changes, new uniforms, new pricing, same-day expansion, premium weddings only. Luis stopped writing. Marisol looked at me. The accountant blinked once and kept her face still. I asked Michael if he wanted to review our supplier credit terms before raising prices. He waved me off. "You worry too much." That was true. I worried enough for all of us. By noon, he had made a promise we could not afford to keep. He promised a luxury wedding package to a hotel chain client we'd been trying to land for 2 years. He quoted a delivery schedule we'd never met, a menu margin that barely covered ingredients, and staffing levels that only worked if nobody got sick, late, or honest. He made the deal in front of Dad, which was the clever part. Once my father heard prestige partnership, doubt became disloyalty. After the client left, I asked Michael for the signed version of the contract. He said he hadn't read all of it because the representative was in a rush. My father told me not to nitpick. My mother brought coffee into the office like we were celebrating a birth. I requested the contract directly from the hotel's procurement manager and read it alone in the storage room. Buried on page 9 was a service failure clause. 1 missed delivery at 1 location and they could cancel the full agreement, charge penalties, and keep the deposit. I printed 2 copies. Then I locked 1 away. That evening, my father asked me to train Michael on the system I was about to stop protecting. I said yes, of course. Then I trained him exactly as requested, nothing more. For years, I had translated chaos into continuity. I did the official version only. I showed him the dashboard. I did not give him the shortcuts. He grew impatient halfway through. There has to be a simpler way. There is, I said. Consistency. He smirked like I was being passive-aggressive. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just tired. 3 days later, he called me from the warehouse because a seafood order had doubled by accident. I told him the process for correcting it. He asked me to just handle it. "I'm in a client meeting," I lied. He swore under his breath, not loudly, just enough. That was the first time he had to solve one of his own problems. It was also the first time he decided to solve one by blaming me. At Friday lunch, my father closed his office door and used the gentle voice that meant he had already chosen a side. Michael had told him I was withholding support, that I was creating bottlenecks, that my attitude was making the transition harder than it had to be. The phrases were too polished to be Michael's. I listened without interrupting. That unsettled Dad more than tears would have. Then he said something careful. "You've always been valuable, but you need to remember this is still a family business." Still, as if I'd somehow wandered outside the family by expecting competence before promotion. I asked whether family business meant responsibility followed the loudest son. He sighed and said I was making it personal. I almost laughed. Nothing in our house was ever called personal until it affected Michael. When I left the office, Marisol handed me a dispatch sheet with 3 handwritten corrections, mine from last week, copied badly by Michael. He had changed the van assignments, and one of those vans was headed straight toward the hotel launch event. I caught the error 20 minutes before departure. The refrigerated van scheduled for the hotel had been rerouted to a private birthday order across town. I stood in the loading bay with the paper in my hand. For years, I had treated every mistake like a fire only I could see. Run fast, fix quietly, protect the family, protect the name, protect Michael from becoming the full cost of himself. This time, I called him down from the office and asked him to confirm the assignment in front of Luis and Marisol. He glanced at the sheet and said yes, confidently, twice. I nodded and stepped aside. Luis looked at me like he was watching someone lower a glass without catching it. The van doors slammed shut. 43 minutes later, the client called, but not me first. They called my father. I knew because I heard his voice before I saw him, sharp and thin through the office wall. The tasting had arrived warm, delayed, and incomplete. One crate was missing. Another had leaked. The hotel manager was furious. Dad stormed out, demanding answers. Michael blamed dispatch, then traffic, then warehouse staff, then finally me. Usually, not always, never officially. I handed Dad the dispatch sheet with Michael's initials beside the reassigned vans. He stared at it longer than I expected. Michael said the initials could have been copied. I said yes, they could have. Then I placed the vendor portal log beside it, showing who had overridden the route at 9:12 a.m. Not me. Nobody apologized. Families like mine don't apologize when blame can still circulate. They only move the target. Dad rubbed his temple and told everyone to go back to work. That night, Michael sent me a message he should never have put in writing. He wrote, "I know what you're doing." No greeting, no specifics. Just that line, followed by another. "If the contract falls through, Dad will know who poisoned this." I read it twice, then took a screenshot and filed it into the folder. Poisoned this. Interesting choice of words, as if accuracy had become sabotage. The next morning, my mother arrived early with pastries and a strategy. She told the staff we were in a temporary adjustment phase. Then she took me aside and asked why I seemed cold. I said I was working. She lowered her voice. "You know your brother was always meant to lead. You're better behind the scenes." There it was. Not a mistake, not a moment, a design. I smiled at her and asked if she wanted coffee. She relaxed immediately. People trust you most when they think they've reduced you. By the end of the week, Michael reduced me on paper too. He changed my title from operations manager to support coordinator. I found out because payroll sent me the approval chain by mistake. The salary stayed the same for now, but authority shifted quietly. My father had approved it at 7:08 a.m. My mother had replied with one line, "Good for morale, good for morale." I printed the email and put it into the folder. The first cut came that afternoon. A produce supplier requested urgent substitution. They called me first. I redirected them to Michael. 2 hours passed, then 4. At 5:30, Luis found me and said dinner service prep was short by a third. I checked the clock. Michael was still in the office, telling Dad he had everything under control. He did not have anything under control. By 6 o'clock, the kitchen was improvising. Dad asked why I hadn't stepped in. I asked whether support coordinators still had authority to approve supplier substitutions. He stared at me, then at Michael, then back at me, and for 1 second I saw the math happening. Not remorse. Math. How many invisible things had I been doing? How expensive would it be if I stopped? Could he admit that in front of Michael now? He chose pride. "Don't be difficult," he said. So I nodded and went back to my desk. At 8:14 p.m, the hotel chain sent formal notice. They were reviewing the launch failure. Then my father asked me a question he should have asked years earlier. How much of this operation runs through you? He asked it after everyone else had gone. I answered honestly. Vendor relationships, scheduling logic, seasonal margins, emergency backups. He sat down slowly, then he said the part that mattered. Why didn't you tell me? I almost admired it. Even now, he wanted the failure to begin with my silence, not his certainty. I did, I said, just not in speeches. I left the folder on his desk. 3 days later, I resigned, not theatrically, just a formal letter and a consulting proposal with hourly rates high enough to hurt. My father called it extreme. My mother called it cruel. Michael called it blackmail. I called it documentation. Inside that house, they would keep rearranging blame until it felt like history. My brother got everything, until the day I stopped carrying it for him.